Clint,
Colette,
hello. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. I was a little under the weather over the weekend, and today's like the first good day after a few rough days. So I'm very happy.
Did you get it from your kids?
I mean, I always so they're just wonderful little petri dishes of life,
Oh my God.
including
Saw
virus
a,
life.
I saw a meme today running in one of the parent Slack channels that was like, what do you get as a toddler? Here's the value exchange. You get free food, 24/7 entertainment and love and support. And what do I get? $1,500 childcare bill and double pneumonia. 2 weeks.
Yep, yep.
Boom. That's pretty much a description of what it's
Not
like
to
to have a toddler.
mention never sleeping as well as you could have.
Well, I'm glad you're feeling a little bit better. Uh, any news on the code freeze front? Are we freezing code? Did we, did we slush during Thanksgiving?
There was no official prohibition where I work that I'm aware of, and actually the rhetoric sort of toned down in the weeks
Oh,
leading up. I feel like I've in my sort of corner of the company, I've sort of I'm not in charge of that by any means, but I've got the ear of the people who are, and so they didn't even bring it up because they know my opinions now, which is great.
the bonus of having a podcast.
I think so. It's working.
Uh, cool. Our loud opinions are
So
making it.
hello, people whose ear I
Hi.
have. Still not into code freezes.
Still don't like them. Don't
Yeah.
ask us to do them.
Although I did get some very strong opinions from sort of our greater community. I sort of put some feelers out there because folks seem to not sit super well with what we said. And
Really?
yeah, there's some folks that feel like, what? I really like them and they help me because. So stay tuned, listeners.
We should explore this more.
I
We
am
should turn it into an
gathering,
episode.
and please send us your opinions on what we had to say about code freezes, because I think that there's something here that we haven't really talked much about as a community. I haven't heard much about this other than just this like summary, like for, against, and most people are against it in the resilience community. So the more to come. I want to get to the bottom of this. I think there are some benefits to maybe thinking a different way, and maybe we can get like a counter opinion on. I think it'll be fun.
Ooh, that'd be great. Exciting thoughts on maybe some 2025 episodes. So we have an amazing podcast set up today. I'm so excited. I've been excited about this since we put the Google form out. Some of these questions that came in, I was like, these are going to be the questions that make this show amazing. So we asked Vanessa Huerta Granda to come join us. So she's going to be joining us to answer these specific questions about sort of metric-y related questions, right? So the first one is about, what if your CEO really wants a dashboard? What do you put on it? And the second one is basically incident counts, MTTR, similar metrics. They're often criticized as being useless in the LFI community. Maybe we're being a little too dogmatic. I'll read them again in a second, but I'm very excited to welcome Vanessa Huerta Granda to help us answer this. I thought of her immediately when I saw these questions. Vanessa is a technology manager for resilience engineering at Innova. Previously, she worked at Jelly.io, helping companies make the most of their incidents, and has spent the last decade focusing on production incident processes, learning from incidents, and handling major incidents as incident commander. She has spoken and written on incident metrics, sharing learnings, and in 2021 co-authored Jelly's Howie, the post-incident guide. Huge favorite for us.
Huge.
She is passionate about continuous improvement, getting teams to talk to each other, and sharing incident findings. Vanessa, welcome.
Hey, Vanessa.
Hey, Clint. Hi,
It's so-
besties.
It's so great to see you. We're so excited that you could be on the podcast with us.
Thank you.
For I think I told you this in Slack the other day when I asked if you wanted to be a part of this episode. I saw the wording on these questions, Vanessa, and I thought of you immediately. That's like how related to me the subject is here. But first, I know you, Clint knows you. We've kind of been in similar circles for a while now, but our audience might not know you. And so I would love it if you could talk a little bit about yourself and your background and how we like to ask everybody, how did you get into like learning from incidents? How did that all happen?
Oh my gosh. How much time do you have? All right. So I am currently the Resilience Engineering Manager at Innova International, where I have been working for a year and a half, but it would have been 10 years, except that I took a little Rumspringa where I worked at Jelly.io teaching people how to run their incident programs. So basically, I've been in site reliability engineering for a decade. I'm really, really passionate about incidents. I'm really passionate about getting people to talk to each other. Somehow I became just really into doing data around incidents. And so a lot of the work that I do is, keeping track of our incidents, making sure that we actually have incident reports that make sense and that people read. Everybody talks about cross-incident analysis, and I guess I actually do it. How did I get into this? I had a mentor that actually, I don't know why she thought that I would be good at it. I was very, very young, and I was working at a very young startup where, everyone was doing everything, and I wanted to make more money. And this person, I applied for a job, and she was like, "Yeah, sure, you could be an incident commander." They call them masters of disaster at the time, which I hated that job. Because I was 24 and I looked like I was 15, and all of the men, because they were all men, I'm not going to be like the master of disaster, but they, I guess my boss was like, well, she does all of the jobs at this startup, so she probably knows how to like handle all disaster. And so I fell in love with this. And then, somehow my Twitter stopped being all about The Bachelor and started giving me like John Oswald stuff. And so here I am.
I mean, The Bachelor is another form of disaster, so
Yeah,
it tracks.
it tracks.
Well, there are so many things in there. It's like the master disaster. I feel like they should have given you like a branded electric guitar when you joined. That's amazing.
Sounds like a professional wrestling group, like, we're the masters of disaster. We're here to handle your incident.
It was a very different environment.
We have this, I think there is a tendency to view those of us who work in resilience engineering as being, I don't know, like there's like before resilience engineering view, safety 1 or safety 2, right? There's like this was when you arrived as the master of disaster, was like a lot of the thinking in that organization. Was it more what you would call like safety 1 thinking?
It was like ITIL. It was very much like ITIL. It was, I was part of the problem management team. One of the things that I'm really proud of is that the team is now called Resilience Engineering because it made sense to change the name to it.
That's so cool.
So yeah, but I'm really happy that my mentor was someone who was very open to the ideas to try things out. Part of it is kind of like you do have to sell to leadership what they understand and what they know. And so, hey, this is a problem management team, even though what they're doing is, resiliency. It is what it is.
Yes. Selling to leadership. That is a great seg into our question or our set of questions, right? So as you know, we have the podcast has like a Google form. By the way, you can write into us with your questions at thisisfinepod.com. You can see a link to the form there. So a couple questions came in really early on. Again, you came to mind. The first one is your CEO says that you must have a resilience dashboard with a bunch of metrics on. What do you put on it? And then the second question was incident counts, MTTR, and similar metrics are often criticized as being useless. However, in my experience, their absence can leave a vacuum that is actually worse. And the LFI community, that's the Learning from Incidents community, might be too dogmatic on the negatives they bring rather than the positives a skilled practitioner can gain from them. What are your feelings on this topic?
How dare you, listener?
My
Dogmatic?
feeling, oh my gosh.
Us?
My feelings are that I don't get paid enough to argue with my CEO. And I will shout that from the rooftops. And I will say that to anyone who comes to me. And maybe you guys get paid more than I do, in which case, like, buy me a coffee, and that's awesome. But I just like, I am more, I think in LFI, I'm probably more metrics forward than most people, more of our LFI friends. And I think it's because I like to push boundaries. My husband's always saying that I always like to just like, try to etch myself in there. And so, the first question was around dashboards. So we do have a resilience dashboard at our organization. I think that if you're not the one providing metrics, somebody else is going to provide them. And I think that
Painful, but true.
if you're in charge of like incident stuff, or if you're involved in incident stuff at all, you might as well be the one that's doing the metrics, because somebody else is going to be doing the metrics. And I would rather it's me who they're coming from rather than somebody else. Not because I think that I'm smarter than everybody else,
Preach.
but I think that I'm more
So
intimately
true.
familiar with this kind of work than other people, right? Other people in software engineering, they're focused on other things. Like I actually get to make this my job.
And so you understand the nuance there, I think,
Right.
right? More than maybe, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I would get ahead of the problem. So yeah.
What do you like on your dashboard? What are your favorite?
So yes. So like I mentioned, I wouldn't argue. I would definitely show like MTTR and amount of incidents. You kind of have to show them because people are going to ask you for them, right? I make them dynamic. You kind of have to break them out, be able to filter them by whatever matters to your organization, right? If it's product line, if it's teams, if it's whatever it is, right? Like, so currently I work at Innova. We have a bunch of different products that we sell. We have an SMB line, we have a direct to consumer, right? Like different things. Being able to filter that makes a huge difference. I think a lot of incidents about how it impacts our user, right? It's not about, Kubernetes these or like the cloud this. It's about like, were you able to buy your tickets to see Taylor Swift, or were you able to like check out? And so what part of the customer journey was impacted? So this is your chance to actually go ahead and talk to people, which is my favorite thing to do because I like love gossiping and I really thrive when I get to talk to people within the organization. So you get to talk to like the product owners, you get to talk to like different people in engineering, your principal engineers, your staff engineers, and ask them kind of like, okay, like what matters to you? What makes the money, or where do we lose money? I work for a fintech company right now. And so I have to talk to lawyers about this kind of stuff. I'm not a lawyer. I like hate like reading long papers, but like sometimes we have an incident that might be like a small thing technically, but it has to be treated as like it has to be solved ASAP, right? Because we're a highly regulated industry. And so that is a big thing. So we actually separate in that dashboard, separated by the customer journey. Another big one. So people like root cause. I don't love root cause.
No, more dogma.
We do tag our incidents by like contributing factors. And in order to do that, we've done a lot of work behind the scenes. Every year we take a look at the previous incidents and kind of try to figure out what are some possible contributing factors that we would include in our incident reports. Another one that we do is the trigger. If it was
Can I get you to back up, Vanessa? That's pretty interesting. You know me, I love ethnographic studies. I've spoken at SRECon before about them, but I'm curious what that looks like. Like you said, every year you kind of take a look at them. Is that a big painstaking process, or just kind of something you do throughout the year and finish it off at the end of the year? Because I think that's really valuable.
That's something we do throughout the year. We usually do kind of like a weekly review of all of our incidents, and we keep track of all of that stuff. We have a monster. This is kind of a little bit embarrassing. We have a monster Jira queue that where we keep our incident reports. That you kind of like JQL your way into it, and that's how you figure out, and you can query and like figure out like all of the stuff. The other thing with going back to the dashboard is that I really believe that everything should change. So the dashboard, the metrics that you have today need to change next year, right? Like your business changes, your problems change, your technology changes, right? All of that is going to change. Your bosses change. What they care about is going to change. And so that dashboard cannot remain the same.
Mm.
So, yeah.
I'm curious, like, who is the audience for the dashboard in your...
That's a great question. That has been, I think, at the moment for my organization, it's like product and engineering leadership. There was a time when it was like everyone, and I think everyone is encouraged to use it. I wish we had more filtering capabilities where all engineers could filter and see all of their incident reports and get a good inside view into everything. Again, that's kind of like the wish for infinite, just like data analysis. But I think, that's different. That's not really SRE work. But yeah, we're talking about a dashboard that's being requested by a CEO or more C-level executives. I do send a weekly recap of our incidents. And for that one, it's the things that they care about, right? Like, what was the impact? Really what they care about.
And when you talk about impact, do you talk about money, presumably?
We don't translate it into terms
like
of money.
legal and... Yeah.
We can't translate it into terms of money a lot of the time. It's just simply like, this is what happens, right? This was down for X amount of time. I can't make guesses to things that I don't know are true. We've tried to do it. We've tried to do random math calculations around like, this translates to this amount of money, but like,
it's enough of a lie that you don't want to put it around. I'm curious, one thing that I've noticed is the reason that I asked you about who the dashboard is for is I've noticed a tendency, especially in organizations that let's say are not metric savvy or very on their own metrics. Like, you wouldn't see necessarily teams having their own metrics that they follow or look at, for example. I've seen when a dashboard gets created for leaders that can cause a reaction down the chain to the front line teams. And sometimes those teams come back to us and they're like, we wish you had consulted us on this dashboard. Like, why are you showing this? And it's a little bit I think that's a fair question to some degree, right? It's like, we might not be able to warn every single team. We might not be able to get a hold of everybody and get their input on something that one person in particular has asked for, right? But how do we think about, one of the things that I told one of my teams the other day was I just don't want us to be presenting something or have somebody read something and have it be a surprise for the team.
absolutely.
That is behind those metrics, right? I don't want them to be surprised that somebody's asking them questions about something. Do you ever get that pushback, or do you ever have problems?
We absolutely have. And that's why we have to be good. And that's what I tell my team, right? We are a very high visibility team, but that's what you get when you work in SRE, right? You get to call yourself an SRE.
Welcome to the show. Yeah.
That's why we get paid the medium bucks. I do think on your other part though, I think relationship building is very important, right? Doing incident work, you do work with a lot of different teams, and there's never something new that I don't run past other people. You might not be able to run it past everybody else, but you're able to run it past enough people that you're able to get their feedback. Not everybody's going to be happy, but people are able to understand hey, if the CEO is asking for something, it's not that you're going to be able to say hey, I don't want to give you this number because, John Oswald told me that this is not something you should do. I can't send him a
I don't know. Sometimes I might want to do that. But no, I also do not do that. I'm curious though, because there's a reason that folks in LFI are down on some of these numbers, specifically MTTR, which is that they're horseshit to some degree, right? And I'm curious about, fine, I'll give you the horseshit, and then I'll sidle up with the side of nuance.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
So this is what I do, and it's again my I'm always trying to sneak something in there, in just everything in my life. That's just always how I've dealt with everything in Latina. That's what we do. So, think about why we don't like MTTR, why it's useless, right? Like mean time to resolution. In the past month, I've dealt with like tons of incidents, and they all have been completely different, right? Like you can have some networking blips, you can have some issues because our vendors are just taking too long doing these things, and maybe some of our vendors don't even answer us. And you could have something that's just like a complete mind fuck because things have been bloating for ages. And then you have something that like you just need to revert and it's fine. And so all of them are going to like take different amount of time to like resolve. And so trying to average them is not going to tell you anything about the incident, right? And so why would an executive or somebody in a leadership position care about mean time to resolve, about how long it takes to resolve an incident? So in my head, it's like, well, we care about how long our customers are impacted. That's something legitimate, right? Or we care how long our engineers are spending their time in incidents. And so these are things that maybe we can handle, right? And so that's when we bring in the context, right? So if we want to understand how long our customers are impacted, then, we can take a look at maybe these kinds of incidents are because of a process that only happened once a day. And so even though resolving it wasn't that difficult, the process that only happened once a day, it meant that, you were out of luck. And maybe there's something that we can do about it, about fixing that process, making changes to that process where it can be resolved earlier. And we were actually able to change that. When it comes to how long it takes for our engineers spending time on incidents, we were able to take a look and say, okay, let's take a look at our incidents that are taking really, really long to resolve. What is the difference between those incidents and the incidents that are taking less time to resolve? Maybe the incidents where people are resolving them faster, they have some observability tools. Maybe they have different people on call. Maybe the incidents that are taking really long to resolve, like they're only depending on one person, the one subject matter expert that really, really knows everything, and everybody else, there's kind of like a vacuum in knowledge. How do we solve that? And so what I really think matters here is not just presenting that number, but trying to understand the context behind it and trying to understand what you're trying to solve for, right? So how long does it take to resolve? What is happening behind that? And then not just crossing your fingers and hoping for the best, but actually making a recommendation to leadership and then holding them accountable and saying like, maybe let's make a change to this process, and maybe let's make sure that we have engineering time to fix this process. And if you don't want this MTTR to be this high, like let's actually put resources on this.
I think the word you used early in the description catches me every time. Context. Like, wish I remember who said this. I may have been Fred Hebert, but don't quote me on that. Trying to reason about incidents just by looking at MTTR is like trying to guess what's in the presents under the Christmas tree without opening them. Like, you might be right. Like, right, the size, there's kind of something there.
The ball shape
like,
gift
there's
is
kind of
valuable.
something there. But there's, like if
or
it's
someone's trying to trick you and they put something inside a ball.
Or just, you have an idea of what you think should be in a long box that looks like a hockey stick, but it might be golf clubs. Like, you're not going to know until you open them. And what I like, what you're talking about is you kind of need to get them to open the presents. Like, you need to say, no, like, we're going to go open a couple, right? We're going to look into this and see the context here. Like, this is happening. It may not be all the pattern, right? But these big ones that you wanted to look at first, kind of empty. These little ones, kind of full and dense. Like, that context, the metric got them to look. And that's where I think I've come around a little bit on this, where I think I started at the dogmatic place of like, these metrics, they don't have normal distribution, right? So throw them right out, right? How dare they? But then as we started digging into them at a few organizations, it's like, there are useful components here. It's just what you don't want to let someone do is like have MTTR last month up 3%.
Right.
We are in alert, right? But you want them to know it's information, it's data, but it doesn't actually have meaning without all that context.
Yeah. It's like, I had more time on my phone last week. Well, I was sick last week. I didn't have anything else going on.
I also like We did this in a previous episode where we talked about executive presence and incidents, and you have to kind of, when you're wanting to fix that problem, you have to start by understanding what the executive really needs, right? Which is they need some information so that they can, talk to their stakeholders and the people that care about what's going on, right? And I kind of look at this the same way, which is, as somebody who is a manager of managers, I'm far enough away from the work that I have a lot of empathy for folks who are even higher up the chain and even further from the work. They don't have any it's like they need information and they don't have the deep, rich knowledge that comes with doing that hands-on work on the ground. So you've got to give them something. And metrics are often what people reach for when they're trying to get information to make good decisions, the best decisions they can for their organizations. And so, you kind of got to learn how to give them the metrics that help them see big picture stuff while also giving them enough context, enough storytelling, enough nuance so that they can make the right decisions that they're going to use that.
And so
that
this is the part where it's so hard because SREs are not analysts. They're not trained in presenting the sort of information. And this work isn't easy. Being able to present data and make a case for something is not the same skill as, writing software. And I think that's the problem. That's the part.
The statistical skill set that I've gained in trying to do this is just enough to push me off the Dunning-Kruger cliff for statistics and go find a data scientist every time. No, I'm probably wrong. And I almost always am in some level, right? We try to present these metrics, but we start to realize I don't have this skill. I don't want to develop this skill. This could take years. And there are people here, usually most companies will have somebody who presents data. And that relationship is really, really important when you're tasked with making a dashboard that has any kind of meaning at all. I have struggled with that for sure. I think other people in SRE position may too. We have data. We have lots of data, more than most engineers probably. But we know we're not qualified to do much with it, or it's going to take us a long time and be very inefficient.
I'm also going to walk out a little bit further on the cliff and say your friends in design and UX and product might be able to help you here too, right? Which is you ultimately are presenting this data as a product for an end user. And you can find out a lot just by doing the right user interviews and gaining context into their day-to-day work and how they would use this stuff in order to put the right information in front of them, right? So, yeah.
Is that what we're doing when we're interviewing people for incidents? It's like a product interview for the complexity of the system as a product. Tell me about your experience. I'd never thought about this before, but the stuff we ask, in something like the Howie Guide, which I know you worked on, Vanessa, it's not all that different from a customer advisory board, right? So tell me, what was it like to be on that incident call?
It really is. No, it really is. I think that's why I relate so much to those kinds of roles. I really thrive being an SRE, but I do enjoy the more conversational aspects of the role.
You lean into the socio part of the socio-technical.
Yes. And so, going back to the first question, yes, dashboards are great. And yes, I will never say to my CEO, no, I'm not going to create this dashboard because John Osborne told me not to. But in order for a dashboard to succeed, you kind of do have to eventually go and give them the context, eventually go in and have some sort of conversation with somebody who has enough power to make decisions. Otherwise, it doesn't really make sense.
Well, and I really love the idea of coming back to what they care about, what impact is, because they might not actually, if you ask them an extra couple questions, it turns out they might not care about MTTR. They might care about customers' experience of downtime, right? Like you said, they might care about how much their teams are spending on incidents, but they might not care about MTTR, the official version of it. And so you might even be able to just sort of have that conversation with them, say, by the way, this is our MTTR, but here are these other two metrics, and we think you might like these more because they actually speak to the business impact that you probably care more about.
think you said earlier, why do they care about MTTR? I think it's accurate to say because we told them to.
Yeah.
Like,
It's our fault.
we
Yeah.
in the engineering community got excited. We were
Tell you
like,
why mine. We were drowning in incidents, and me and my boss were like, we should tell them how much time we're spending on incidents so that they like stop having incidents. And then they were like, well, this is a number. We have never had numbers. Let's just go for it.
it feels better than no number.
Yeah, I
right?
mean-
Like even a bad one sometimes.
So I made my career off of that.
Well, hopefully, dear readers, to question writers, dear listeners, you're not readers unless you're reading the transcript of this, which fair. I guess that's a way to consume podcasts. Hopefully we've answered your question. I think we have. And I'm so glad we had Vanessa here to
Thank you.
help us. Thank you so much for joining us today, Vanessa.
Thank
it
you
was
for
super
having me.
great to chat with you. And hopefully maybe we can have you back on for another question. We really need people to write in with questions though, if we want to keep going with this. So thisisfinepod.com. Please visit our website and go send us some questions.
And tell a friend to
Yeah.
listen.
All right. Thanks, everybody.